So you gave up a career as a software development engineer, making satellites in space to go indie and start building games, correct?
Yeah, that's about the summary of it, yeah.
Okay, so what was such a burning passion inside of you that made you want to start developing video games?
So games were always sort of a thing that I was really interested in. Like, I've been playing video games since forever, for as long as I can remember. We had like the original Nintendo when it came out. My uncle had an Atari that we always played. There was always just like, it was a really fun thing for me and my sisters together, was just to play games. And so I spent a lot of my childhood playing games, spent a lot of my adolescence sort of identifying with a lot of different games to fulfill this like small town, oh gosh, I'm on a great adventure kind of fantasies and whatnot. It's just always been something I've been interested in. Although I sort of convinced myself that game development wasn't a career, because I was just like, oh, you know, for smart graphics programmers make games, not anybody else. Like, you have to be like super genius to make video games. That's sort of why I went like a different career path, because I've always been interested in software and stuff. I went software engineering. I got a real people job in an office, you know, and did that kind of thing for a while. And then finally I was like, you know what, I really, really like games. Like, games meant a lot to me growing up. I want other people to have experiences that mean a lot of things to them that I create, you know, and then I discovered sort of indie games and the fact that people could just make games just out of the blue. And then I started making games, and that's sort of the long and short of how I went from loving games to making games, and still loving games.
That's really interesting, because what college did you attend?
I went to Boston University, so it's in Boston, and I went there. I actually got my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life when I went to college, and I wanted to be an engineer because I was bored. So I went to engineering. I got my degree in electrical engineering, but it wasn't until like my senior year of college where I was like, I started realizing that it was the software part of everything that I liked and not so much the hardware part. So I just took a bunch of software electives my senior year, because I couldn't change my major by that point. And when I graduated, I just told everybody I was a software engineer, and then I got hired into software engineering roles, taught myself a lot more of the software that I was sort of missing from not having that education, and then just boom, software engineer, which was the easiest way to do it, I guess. And now I have an appreciation for hardware on top of that.
That is so fascinating. And so, how did you think that video games were more complicated than electrical engineering and software engineering? And why did you think that you could do one but you couldn't do the other?
I'm not really sure. Now, like, this is the first time anybody's ever asked me that, and I've never really looked at it from that perspective before. But in my head, it was just one of, like, video games were just this, like, nebulous thing that existed that people made, whereas, like, at least with electronics, like, I understand, like, oh, here's a capacitor, here's a resistor, here's the logic, okay, now we have something that does something. You know, and for some reason that made more sense in my head than video games being easy, because there was this level of abstraction where, especially, like, way back with, like, the original Nintendo, you know, oh, how does that exist? I don't know. They have to, like, get all these bits in the right places to do this and that, and it's, you know, you have to be able to do super low level, like, optimization for everything, and you just have to be a super genius. And I don't know why I never thought that games had to be more complicated than complex circuitry, but for some reason in my head that was what made sense.
Maybe it's because electrical engineering is so well documented, and we have blueprints of the electrical circuits, and like there's no blueprint for video games, and there's a new
much older thing to be, you know, in electronics, and even like other types of software I thought were easy and fine. But I think it was maybe because games are such a new medium that you had to be a super genius to be able to do it. Turns out you don't have to be a super genius.
Which we are all thankful for.
I know, right?
Do you feel that college prepared or did not prepare you for your first job?
So, yes, it definitely prepared me for my first job, because my first job out of college was making satellites at Lockheed Martin. I was working on one of their satellites that's going to launch next year. What?
I said, because you totally don't have to be a genius to be a rocket scientist.
And that also seemed easier than making games. But anyway, so my first job out of college was working at Lockheed Martin on satellites, and my junior and senior year of college, I worked on a student-built satellite as sort of a side project, and then my senior design project and some summer internships. And so, like, a lot of my focus at the end of my college career was a lot of working on satellites, which prepared me pretty well to work on a satellite. I would say none of my college education really prepared me for making games, but it definitely did prepare me for that first job coming right out of school and then going to make satellites, because here I was, you know, a newly graduated senior who already had experience working on a satellite, being hired to work on a satellite. Like, that's pretty prepared.
Perfect. Can you tell us about the work environment at Lockheed Martin, like social interactions or professional expectations of you?
Lockheed Martin was weird because, so Lockheed Martin is weird because it's such a large company, and it was, you know, a good number of years ago when I worked there now, but like, it's such a people who worked at Lockheed Martin have had such like vastly different experiences than I have. But I worked in a very small set in Lockheed Martin, which was a space systems company out in Palo Alto in California. And it was very like laid back but older group, so like there wasn't a lot of other newly graduated people that I was working with. It was all people sort of in their 40s or 50s, or people who had been working in space systems forever, which was really fascinating, and I gained a lot of experience about just like random knowledge about space and how satellites work and how, you know, multi-billion-dollar projects that get shot by a rocket into space work, and things like that. But it was a very, like, compared to the game industry, a very professional environment. You know, like I had to wear nice pants and like blazers to work and stuff like that, and like show up on time, and you know, everybody did their very like professional thing, and there was very specific structure to the company and the hierarchy and meetings and like business people. Like, you know, I would have meetings with NASA, so there's like people in business suits who are really important people. You know, it's a much more professional environment, but it was very educational. It was very different. It was really neat. I liked it a lot, but it was definitely a structure that I didn't want. You know, like that's, I think, the whole purpose of like when I went indie. I was like, no, screw it. I want to do everything myself, unprofessionally.
I'm not sure if this.
It was fun. It was interesting.
Have you ever heard Lockheed Martin compared to Stark Industries?
I haven't, but that makes sense.
Okay. Let me skip ahead a question and ask, what skills have been a professional asset to you, other than being, in your words, a damn fine programmer?
I mean, that helps a lot, but I think one of the things that, this is like the advice I like to give a lot of people when they say that they don't have the skill set for something or they're looking for what to learn. I find that a lot of, especially in game development, because it is such a new medium and everything's sort of changing so rapidly all the time, a lot of the important skills to know is to learn how to learn things, you know, become easily adaptable to new technology, figure out what your learning style to learn a new skill is. Like, when I wanted to learn Unity, I already knew that the best way that I learn a new language or a new tool is to just pick a simple sounding project and work through it until I can make sense of it in my own code. You know, just pick something and hack it a whole bunch of things until it makes sense, and that's how I sort of learned new APIs and new method calls and new structures for things. And so it's one of those, I think that's one of the most underrated and important skills, is to just understand how you learn and have a thirst for knowledge for new things. And that's probably one of my best assets of my skill set, is just knowing how to Google really well and then retaining that knowledge that I've Googled.
Never underestimate that skill.
Yeah, and I mean, that's actually one of like the marks of a good programmer, I think. Like, all the best programmers I know are the best Googlers.
Right. Googling Stack Overflow. What constraints or constrictions have you felt on your own game development journey? Have there been financial, technical, or social constrictions on you in your life?
Oh gosh, there's all sorts of constrictions on game development. Like, for me personally, so it's weird, I was in like a really interesting spot when I left my permanent job to go like solo full-time indie, because since I had worked in a job area that was actually very well paying and secure and had like 401k stuff, like real awesome professional things, like I had this whole slew of savings sort of saved up when I went indie. So I didn't have a financial constraint for a little while, which then put me into a weird spot where I was really happy with just like trying out various experimental things and not really making money off of it. Now I'm in a spot where I need to figure out how to make money off of those things because that savings has definitely come to an end, which is interesting. It's shifted my focus a lot from just like trying things out and exploring what I want to make and just sort of like working on weird little things to, oh yes, I should figure out how to get this on itch.io or make a console game or do something, and like has shifted a lot of my focus the last few months towards like the weird businessy things. But then it's interesting because when I didn't have the financial constraint, I was able to focus on other things where it was, where do ideas come from? Why do some ideas sound really good in my head and not work well when I make them? And work out those sort of limitations of how ideas sort of translate into games. So there's a lot of really like weird constraints there, figuring out why an idea that you thought was awesome actually doesn't work out in like a weird interactive medium. And those are probably the two biggest constraints. Then there's also like, I feel like this is something that everybody struggles with, but we all think that we're awful and terrible at everything, which always just like can shut you down from working on something. Like, oh, here's an idea and it's great, but I started making it and it's terrible, so therefore I'm terrible and I shouldn't make games anymore. Which I'm sure is a feeling a lot of people can identify with, and sort of getting over that and talking to other people about that feeling I find is really, really helpful because everybody feels it. And once you find out everybody feels it, you feel a little bit better, but not very much better, but a little bit. There's a lot of like, especially when you're like your own solo developer, there's just a lot of pressure on yourself to be really good at everything. And you can't be really good at everything. That's impossible. But you want to be, but you can't.
Right. I really enjoyed when you mentioned that in your talk at GDC. That was a good speech you gave.
Yay.
We'll include a link to that.
I never know how to respond to compliments. Compliments are so hard to respond to.
Case in point.
I know, it's just like, oh no, you don't understand, I'm terrible.
Hey, the fact of the matter is that you were on the stage at GDC, and that means something. So,
it's very nerve-wracking.
Speaking of nerve-wracking things, I have another question for you. You can't shy away from this one because you got yourself on that stage at GDC. So what networking or public speaking advice can you give?
Oh gosh.
You did something right.
Basically what I did was I just started throwing myself at every event ever and pretended I had something to talk about, and then a few of them started saying yes, which was interesting because, like, when I made the journey to going full-time sort of solo developer, I also, left my home and I went traveling for like a year and a half and I didn't live anywhere. So I had this kind of interesting story of like dropping everything and following your dreams that people sort of like to hear about sometimes. So I pitched like a few of those talks to different events and like smaller events. Like the first one I ever really spoke at was this tiny Poland. That just, they heard what I was doing and they invited me there, and I was going to be in Europe anyway, so it was cheap to get me there, and they wanted somebody new to talk about something. I pitched that talk. And what?
Can I interrupt you for a second? And can I ask you to slow your speech down a little bit?
Okay, sorry. I have a tendency to talk really fast.
Yeah, well, latency in the camera is not very forgiving. I'm sorry.
Okay, I will talk slower.
Okay. For networking, just throw yourselves, keep showing up. Keep showing up.
It's a lot of that, like a lot of sort of not taking no for an answer for a lot of things as well. Like I had submitted to GDC a number of times before actually getting the opportunity to speak at GDC. And as long as you keep submitting, and then I would also sort of like wiggle my way into different like circles of meeting people. Like, you see, oh, there's the director of GDC over there, I should go introduce myself. And now next time I submit to speak at GDC, there's a face to the name and like a funny little personality of just being like, oh, hi, and having a little conversation. And it sounds really intimidating to do stuff like that, and it's all like absolutely super terrifying. But at the same time, it's very go night or on the weekends in your communities. Make sure you talk to people and have sort of personable conversations with things. I ended up getting really, really good at socializing over the last few years, because I used to be horrible at it, and I used to be, like, really, really nervous when I'd go and talk in front of people. Like, back when I was at Lockheed Martin, every time I would give a presentation, I would be, like, physically shaking because I didn't want to talk in front of people, because I found it so nerve-wracking. But I think finding something that I was really passionate about and wanting to speak about also helps a lot, because you're less nervous talking about something when it's coming more from the heart. A lot of my public speaking advice is just do it no matter how scared you are of it, because screw it. Like, the only way to get better at it is just do it. And practicing a lot. I write down every single word I'm going to say when I'm on stage, like on a piece of paper, and that way I don't, if I get lost, I can just look at that piece of paper. But yeah, a lot of my networking and my speech giving is just doing it despite being terrified of it, because why not?
Sounds like a lot of rinse and repeat process.
Yeah, because there's, like, it's funny because a lot of the sort of public-facing view of it is, oh, you got to speak at GDC, but you don't see the, like, years of me trying to apply to things and meeting people and having something to talk about and writing talks and talking at smaller things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that leads to, okay, now I'm talking at GDC. Like, there's all the stuff that you don't see, and then the final product.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for sharing that. So, do you have any tips, tricks, or cheat codes to being a successful woman in gaming?
No. Meet other women in gaming is sort of a really nice thing. There's not a lot of us, so it's fun to sort of band together and, like, have a little support network of other women in gaming. And I think that's the most helpful part, because, like, for me, a lot of the development community that I, like, started in, because I was in Boston when I first started making games, there was only, like, I'd ever run into, and for some reason I would never talk to them because I was talking to somebody else or I just didn't pay attention to it, and I realized that I had no women friends in gaming for a long time. You know, it wasn't until I started being like, oh, I'll go to women events and meet other women and hang out with other women and see what they're talking about and doing. And I finally started to do that, and I think because there are so few of us, like, it's really helpful to know where the other women are and see what they're doing and, like, check out their cool projects and talk about, like, the random little things that happen in the industry that suck, you know, like the tiny little microaggressions or the huge aggressions, you know, all of the aggressions that happen in the games industry, especially now with, like, the climate that is happening in the games industry. It's just, it feels so nice to be able to have other women to talk to about the things that happen that the men probably wouldn't understand, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Thank you for sharing.
Girl power and sticking together and all that kind of good stuff.
That's exactly what us over here in the Voxelles community are trying to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the nice things that I've seen happening a lot more recently. Is a lot more women-focused groups popping up everywhere, and it's nice because, especially when they're open for everybody, but they're women-focused. You know what I mean? Like how you have here. Like, there are obviously dudes over there, but it's nice that it is more a woman-focused event where we can talk about things like this, or just have a space where women feel more welcome. Because I think that's one of the things that has been so off about the games industry since it started, is that not like we weren't welcome, but we weren't there, you know? And everything caters to a different subset, and it's nice to have another subset to cater to in the other side.
Or it's nice to just try to design games that can be played by everyone and that don't have a gender focus.
Yeah. It's just nice to have different perspectives other than the ones that we've been seeing for the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Okay, so during the year that you made a game every week, how did you maintain the momentum?
I think the most important thing for keeping up the momentum for Game a Week was the fact that I was posting write-ups about it every week. You know, so every single week I had a blog post that would go up, and I would make sure, like, and that would sort of drive me to have something playable or something that I could talk about or something that I felt okay, like, showing off every single week. And it was nice because, like, they weren't really great games. It wasn't like there was somebody out there waiting, like hordes of people waiting for my new game that week, but it was nice to know that there were like some people out there sort of rooting for seeing my next game for the week, or, you know, people that I know would be like, hey, did you make a game this week? And if I had to say no, then I would feel bad.
Being held accountable.
So it was like a lot of the outside working. And then I also sort of got like slightly addicted to the instant gratification every week of having made something tangible, because you know how it is when you're working on like a longer project and it just drags on and drags on and you don't actually see something that is an actual like feeling of progress week to week. And so it was really nice to have just such short bursts of, oh, I have an idea, oh, I have a game, okay, I've written about it, okay, done, every single week. Like, it was a constant momentum. I think I wrote about it once in like my post-mortem of the entire game a week, is that it felt a lot like running a marathon, you know, where you just sort of keep going, and you know if you stop, you're just going to stop for good. So you just sort of keep going and keep going until you just reach the end and you keel over and take a nap.